Security.
What is worth more, art or life? Is it worth more than food? Worth more than justice?
Alright guys, so I stumbled across this absolutely hilarious interview featuring climate change activist from Just Stop Oil, Phoebe Plummer, who's like some 20-year-old Greta Thunberg wannabe, okay? This is what she looks like, right? For somebody who hates oil and fossil fuels, she has a whole lot of it in her hair, right? So, I mean, I'm just saying, these are the type of people we're dealing with here, okay? Now, again, this is the person, if you guys don't remember, I played a video at the beginning of this video, that vandalized the Van Gogh painting with, like, tomato soup or something like that, which is hilarious because this person is going to complain so much about the lack of food, but yet she's wasting good food, vandalizing things because she can't get her way. Okay, so in this interview with this guy from the UK, Jacob Rees-Mogg, he's going to calmly try to set her straight on some of her woke talking points that she learned from the climate activists. And this person is just going to get more and more and more ridiculous, the climate change activist, as this interview continues to go on. As this guy continues to be reasonable with her and dispute her points, she's just going to get more ridiculous. So again, this is absolutely hilarious. I want to react to it and go from there.
But I'm really delighted to be joined by Just Stop Oil spokesman Phoebe Plummer. Thank you for coming in, because I know you don't agree with me. How do you square the circle that people want to be more prosperous, they want to lead comfortable lives, but you're saying it's absolutely urgent we stop emissions now? How do you make the two work?
Hi, Jacob. Thank you so much for having me on. As you say, I'm Phoebe. I'm 21 and I'm a student from London and a supporter of Just Stop Oil. And I wonder why you think it's incompatible to help people with the cost of living crisis and to switch to renewables, which are 9 times cheaper than fossil fuels. Can you name me one of your viewers who is suffering the consequences of the cost of living crisis, who doesn't want their energy bills to be 9 times cheaper right now?
Well, unfortunately, that's not what's happening, because the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow, and you need to have fossil fuel backup to make up the gap. About half our energy every day is still coming from natural gas. Where's that going to come from?
Facts. Facts. You're going to need backup when the sun is not shining or the wind is not blowing as hard or whatever when it comes to this renewable sources of energy, right? Like you need a backup. You need something that you can rely on regardless of the weather. Again, this is basic stuff.
Well, why aren't we implementing renewable technology? The largest solar farm in the UK was built in 6 weeks.
But it's not
it takes up to 28 years for any oil to come out of the ground in the North Sea.
But it's not going to produce any energy at night. That's the problem with renewables, is that they don't provide the base load that you need.
We already have the capacity to provide so much of our energy from renewables without any technology needed for storage solutions.
But where is this coming from? Because when the wind doesn't blow, when we had really cold days, we were reliant on importing from the EU, on coal and on gas. How are we going to replace that in the short term?
Quite frankly, I'm not a scientist. What I am doing is listening to what all the experts are saying. We're living in this insane world where the experts aren't being listened to.
Yeah, okay, basically, I'm not a scientist. I've listened to everything my activist friends told me. I listened to Greta, right? I read Greta's book. And therefore, I'm educated enough on this topic to sit down and do these type of interviews and to also justify vandalizing property in the name of climate change, right? Because nobody's listening to the experts when quite literally, I mean, all we hear about is the climate religion, right? That's all we hear about. People are listening to the experts. It's just that change is not going to happen as fast as these people want change to happen, right? Because, I mean, to be quite honest with you, the world is not being destroyed, okay? The world's not ending as fast as these people wanted to end, right? Like they said, it was going to be 12 years. Didn't happen.
The United Nations has called for no more oil and gas. The International Energy Agency has said we can have no new oil and gas. The IPCC report, the largest global report on the climate crisis, have all said we can have no new oil and gas. How many more experts need to say it?
Because we can't do it tomorrow. What are we going to do in terms of transport? that we still need petrol for cars and we need diesel for lorries. How are we going to get goods into supermarkets without this?
Quite frankly, I'm not a scientist. What I'm doing is I'm looking at the world, and we're living the effects of the climate crisis today. Right now, people are dying. Children are starving. Families are fleeing their homes.
Yeah, so all these kids are starving, right? People are starving. But you're taking good food and you are using it to vandalize paintings, right? It's not just her, but you also have other climate activists as well. I've showed videos of this where they go into stores and they pour the milk out. Okay, they literally like pour food out on the floor. They wasted all this precious food while also complaining about people starving from climate change while they, again, waste food. They use food to vandalize. Incredible.
Energy.
And it's preventable. We have the solutions.
Cheap energy is one of the things that has hugely extended life expectancy by the ability to control temperatures, whether this is by air conditioning or by heating, the ability to store food more effectively, the ability to transport food, and indeed use fertilizers to grow more food, has all been essential in increasing life expectancy. Taking all that away would be disastrous for life expectancy.
Do you know what's essential in keeping our food supply? Tackling the climate crisis. This year we lost a third of our wheat crops, half of our potato crops, and it's only going to get worse. We're heading to a future where people are going to be fighting over the last loaves of bread at Lidl.
But the only way we get our wheat crop is by putting the fertilizers on that come from fossil fuels. How are we going to replace that? That the productivity of organic farming is so much lower than of modern farming methods. We cannot feed the world on organic farming, and you must know that.
How do you expect to feed the world when our crops are destroyed by droughts, floods, wildfires, storms?
You've always had weather events that have affected crops, but that actually using fossil fuels for fertilizers and moving on to genetic modification of crops has enormously increased the yield. That since Malthus rate, we've increased agricultural productivity by about 2% per annum. And this is what is allowing people to get extended life expectancy because they've got more certainty of food. And this all depends on cheap energy, which has come from fossil fuels.
Yeah. 100% correct. I mean, the answer to that question from that woman is simply technology, right? Improvements in technology will make it so that we will be able to navigate whatever types of weather or climate-related disasters that decrease crop yields, right? We better navigate those stuff because we have better technology for being able to grow food even in less than ideal conditions, right? Because of technology and fossil fuels, right? It's funny how it works because there's a conundrum here that the climate extremists refuse to address, right? For example, last year in Europe, there was a heat wave, an unprecedented heat wave that they said was caused by climate change. Okay, this is climate change. Now, the problem is that Europe, in order to not have people die from the heat wave, they had to use more fossil fuels in order to meet the demand for energy. Now, again, that creates a conundrum because it's like, okay, anytime there's an extreme weather event or energy demands are not being met, then you have to use fossil fuels, right? Fossil fuels have to be there, right, in order to actually provide stable energy during these extreme weather events. But at the same time, these people are saying, hey, we need to stop using fossil fuels. We can't use them. But again, every time there's an extreme weather event, you have to use them in order for people not to die, right? Literally to die from heat strokes. It's just funny how, again, a lot of these climate activists failed to address a lot of these issues that we're seeing with the fact that renewable energy, at least the technology as of right now, is just not good enough to replace fossil fuels. It's not reliable enough. But that's why I'm team nuclear, right? I'm team nuclear. Okay, I think nuclear is the way to go. But they don't like nuclear either for whatever reason.
Jacob, you have 6 children? Do you not care about their future? Do you not care about them being able to feed themselves? Because right now, under this government's policies, your 6 children are heading towards a future that is filled with life-threatening extreme weather events, crop failures, famine, war. Suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
I think you've taken the evidence for an evolving climate and then applied it in an extraordinarily extreme way, and are forgetting about the enormous
I can't believe
advantages.
you're talking to me about an evolving climate.
Well, the climate is...
People are dying.
But this is
Do you
a
know
statement...
how many people are suffering around the world?
What evidence is there that this is because we're using fossil fuels, that the climate evolves, but more people die each year from cold than from heat, as you know?
Have you read the IPCC
I've
report?
looked
What
at
do
it.
you mean? What science?
Well, but in terms, you're making extreme claims, but you're suggesting by not using fossil fuels, we would not produce the food we need to feed the world population.
I'm
that would be
suggesting that
tomorrow.
if we keep on heading down this genocidal path of mass destruction, then no, there won't be any foods in the supermarket. Then we will see vast swathes of the world uninhabitable. We will see mass displacement of people.
But if you took out fossil fuels tomorrow, you would simply not have the productivity of agriculture you need to feed 8 or 9 billion people. And that would be tomorrow. And I'm not saying you shouldn't reduce emissions, I'm not arguing that. I'm simply saying you must do it when you have the technology to replace the energy that you're using. Because otherwise, all the consequences you're arguing for will happen immediately. We will simply not have the food we need to feed the population of the world.
Jacob, you...
I mean, this guy he's 100% on point. He's like, look, the technology is just not there yet. You can't get what you want. Okay, but again, a lot of these left-wing activists, they're so coddled, right? Because they've been told that they're special and that they're right and that they're freedom fighters or whatever, right? They're superheroes. They believe that, hey, we can demand this now and we must get it now, right? We got to get it now. If we don't get it now, then it's the end of the world. They've been brainwashed, man. They've been brainwashed.
No, we're not asking for the taps to be turned off tomorrow.
Yes, you are. Yeah, that's exactly what you're asking for. That's exactly what you're asking for. Because, again, generally speaking, the world, okay, is moving in that direction. They're moving in a direction that these climate activists want the world to move in. They're just not doing it as fast as the climate activists want, and that's what they're upset about.
You know that we're asking for an end to all new fossil fuel licenses in line with what climate scientists around the world are saying.
But if you turn it off for new licenses now, you're requiring a change that is going to happen before we have the technology in place to substitute for it. So you may be delaying it by a few years, but this has to be a rational process to do it once you've got the technology sorted out, and we haven't got the technology yet.
So I understand you're an economics man. Yes. So
I'm more qualified to speak on this subject than you. Right? This guy knows a little bit more than you do.
Economics.
Yeah, so I've done some maths for you. I hope you don't mind. I looked up your net worth online. It's quite easy to find.
It's not actually true. It's easy to find, but it's not actually true.
In the hundreds of millions.
But that's not.
It costs around £20,000 to insulate a British home. So that's 8,000 British homes for your 150 net million, which is what it says online.
Which is untrue. But
do you really think that you're worth more than 8,000 cold, freezing families?
Have you seen the studies on insulation? That insulation.
Do you care about the people living in fuel poverty?
Very much so. When I was Secretary of State for Energy, I was responsible for developing the plan that has brought energy prices down for families. That was policy that I was intimately involved in designing. So of course I care about that.
So you do understand the report that you're asking me about says that the cost of insulating British homes is so expensive because of the government's failure to insulate British homes.
But what happens 3 years after people have insulated their homes? They use the same amount of energy as they did before. There's been a study on this, which I'm sure you've seen reports on. In the first year they save money, in the second year they save a small amount of money, in the third year they have actually made themselves warmer because the economics of it is they have a certain amount they can spend on energy.
What happens when the government fails to insulate British homes? 7.5 million British people live in fuel poverty. Parents are starving themselves so that they can feed their children, and people are freezing to death in their homes because they are forced to choose between heating and eating. People are dying. Are you hearing me?
Because it's simply not true. The government introduced a cap on energy prices and support for families who couldn't afford energy prices, that those were brought in last year, and they are very significant supports to ensure...
What do you mean it's not true? Have you spoken to an ordinary person who is suffering the cost of living crisis right now?
I don't believe there's any such thing as ordinary people. I believe everybody is in their individual way quite remarkable. I think ordinary people is the most condescending way of referring to our fellow British citizens.
Well, of course you don't relate to the ordinary people. You're a millionaire.
Here we go, demonizing the man because he got money, right? You notice how she implied that, hey, you need to take your net worth, right? You need to take all your money and pay for all these people's houses to be insulated, right? That you're a bad person because you have money. You're a millionaire. I mean, these people, bro, like, they all sound the same, right? They're all the same. They're NPCs at this point. This is a non-playable character. She's not listening to anything this dude is saying at all.
Figures, my personal circumstances have nothing to do with whether we impoverish people by making energy prices higher. And you want to make them higher, and I don't. But what I'd say to you finally is, why don't you stand for election? Why do you think it is right to throw soup over a picture rather than standing election and seeing if you can get people to vote for your view of the world?
You're an educated man, Jacob. You know that this is how successful movements of social change happen. They must cause disruption. And Antonio Guterres, he's the Secretary General of the United Nations. He has said that we are on a highway to climate hell. He has said that licensing new fossil fuels is economic and moral madness. The Secretary General of the United Nations is calling for an end to all new fossil fuels. What makes you think that I have time to get into power and make these changes?
So you want to be a dictator? You don't want voters to decide. You
That's
want to tell them.
absolutely not what I said, and you know
Why don't you stand?
Well, that is what you want. Right? That is what you want. That's exactly what you want. But again, speaking of dictatorships, these people will go to China, right? They won't go to China with all this nonsense and demand that they lower their emissions, because they're the number one polluter in the world, man. Right? They're the number one polluter in the world, but yet these people will never pull up to Xi Jinping's palace and say, hey, we demand that you stop using fossil fuels today. They know what will happen, right? They're only allowed to get away with this because they live in the West, where we allow this type of stuff. But it's getting to the point now where, again, these people are using violence to try to justify what they're doing, their activism, because they think that the world is going to end. They've been brainwashed to believe that the world is going to end. And none of these people have been smart enough to figure out that, hey, all these predictions about the world ending due to climate change has just never been true, right? They're not true, okay? The worst of the worst stuff that they said will happen has not happened. And at some point, you got to get on board with, you know, the reality of what's going on here, okay? Are there some extreme climate-related events? Yeah, absolutely. We got to deal with that stuff. Is climate change probably happening? Sure. But it's not as bad as they claim it is. And it's one of those things that we can definitely navigate in a reasonable and logical way without basically essentially destroying people's quality of life in the process.
For election, put yourself forward and see if people want your way.
Because we don't have time. Because if I want to have a future, if I want to have a future where I can feed myself, where I can love my family,
we're not going to feed them. We're not going to feed them without fossil fuels, which are the essential fertilizers.
Thank you for coming on. Change now.
I'm going to have to move on, but I hope you'll come back, because I've enjoyed this discussion and I think it's really good of you to have come on. I'm very grateful. Thank you so much. Thank you to Phoebe.
Yeah, that's like talking to a brick wall, bro. Yo, shout out to this guy, right? Shout out to this guy for stomaching that, right? It would have been difficult for me to get through that, bro. Again, these people are brainwashed, bro. Again, they're NPCs. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.